has taken
Right.
place with the technology, right?
Right.
But I think first and foremost for me, obviously the pandemic would have had a lot of people scratching their heads about, what's next in terms of interaction. I mean, we had a protracted lockdown period in Trinidad, which in its own way would have forced an increased adoption of your traditional platforms like Zoom and Teams. In fact, it became so associated with the dread of another Zoom meeting or another call that even for schooling, like everyone experienced a high degree of video conference fatigue.
Yeah.
And quite interestingly, there was also a concurrent surge in TikTok adoption. Obviously, people had an enormous amount of time to create content, and I discovered metaverse applications in a TikTok environment where I saw this enterprise use case where someone was showing an office team in an office literally interacting with each other with these avatars, and literally showing up to work in Europe.
Yeah.
And just a little quick, and it got me so curious about how we're moving from a two-dimensional screen where everybody's literally checked out from the conversation, screen is off, they're doing everything else but being present in the discussion with a Zoom call. But in
Yeah.
this environment, people are forced to walk across to the office, to shake hands, to interact. And it dawned on me, it's like, well, hang on a tick. I mean, this was supposed to be just a gaming escape relief, but
Yeah.
people are using this for real world interaction that seems so inordinately different from what we were being punished by in the two-dimensional space, that I
Right.
reached out to them. I was like, guys, what the hell is going on with this tech, right?
Yeah.
And this company dug a little deeper. They are a partner to Verbello, which is a US-based technology company that had built this platform in 2012. So in the
Yeah.
height of COVID, you have technology that's been around, but it was just not in its right season of adoption, right? So
Yeah.
so at time of 2020, think about it, people are still in a user content generated social media environment. People are fine with screen based technology. What's the latest phone? Nobody wants to go any further than that.
Yeah.
And I think it's a nice segue into talking about the history of the internet. And I think that's going to really bring home this whole definition of what the hell is the metaverse and why is it a buzz phrase for the past 2 or 3 years. But
Yeah.
30 years ago, Karen, if you remember, there's this Today Show infamous interview in 1994 where the interviewers, and it's on YouTube, you can always just pull it up. It just these guys are mocking what is the internet, and they're talking about the at symbol and what is this ridiculous thing, and why do we need it? And the conversation almost sounded like 2 or 3 years ago with metaverse, and you have to talk about the evolution of the internet itself, right? So we moved
Yeah.
from Web 1, which was really just posted information and a glorified database, into Web 2, which started to connect people. Well, so Web 1 was really information, right? It was an information age, and then it moved into what you could consider Web 2, which was connecting people with each other, in that kind of social sort of version of the internet. And I
That
think what's
search engine came over 2.0, right?
correct, and and and,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and then you moved off into this Web 3, and that's a whole different topic by itself. But this Web 3 notion, but embedded in that is connecting people, places, and things, right? So the whole added bit now is how do you integrate the physical world, the social interactions that we do, but represent it via digital platforms, and that's really what we're seeing, like in the pushing of the envelope now is how do we move people from connecting with each other via devices to actually immersing themselves into the platforms, into the devices, and connected with each other virtually there, right? So that's
Yeah.
been where it's gotten, I would think, incredibly, I suppose, as complex as that 1994 conversation where people are saying, well, why the hell would I want to do that? I'm fine with how things are now, and you have this whole a notion that this is really just a fad phase or for gamers, right? And of
Yeah.
course, I'll go into some more details about how we've seen that to be not the case, even in a Trinidad and Tobago context. But that's to me my journey to getting into this space. Reached out to the company. They were focused in Europe and the rest of the world, and I said, is there an opportunity for us to deploy this technology in the Caribbean? Let's have a chat, for instance, with IDB. and some other partners who are more forward focused in some of these conversations and pilot and see how some of these platforms can be used to develop a compendium of use cases. So that's been sort of the last 2 or 3 years of activity.
Okay. Well, we have a lot to talk about. So I want to talk about the metaverse first, and then we'll dive into VRPark. So one question that kind of came to mind as you were talking, how important was live events with Fortnite? How important was that live event with like Travis Scott and some of the live events that they were doing in pushing the metaverse into like the mainstream conversation? Because I think it wasn't until that Travis Scott and Fortnite collaboration where I was like, oh, okay, this is really a thing.
Yeah, and the I guess the business strategist model in me sort of uh, puts pause on why people just ran after the technology, and I'll talk a bit about my own misgivings about where it went wrong in terms of the
Mm-hmm.
approach. But you're right. So what happened is in the midst of the pandemic, because that's really where it surged, right? So there was this need for increased. Well, let's put it this way: the music industry took a severe hit, obviously, because of the inability for in-person interactions, crowds,
Yeah.
etc. And that pivot into saying, let's use one of the largest and just to be clear, Fortnite is, or sorry, Metaverse is it's at its foundation powered by gaming technology. Like video gaming technology is the way to create the rendering of replication of real worlds and allow for a real-time interaction between players regardless of geography. So some of the fundamental assumptions around metaverse have found their origins in gaming, right? So the
Yeah.
obvious way to create scale and buzz and attention was to use an already established, however Gen Z, Gen Alpha populated environment with this concert, and it was ridiculously well attended. And I think you're right. It sort of spawned the opportunity use cases. But I want to say at the early onset that I feel that the opportunistic Silicon Valley guys just looked at it now as, if we triple down on the investment on the platform, how can we recoup it by going straight to market with this unknown technology, widely unknown technology, and try to monetize too early. And I'll speak a little bit later about how that really offended a lot of investors in the subsequent year or two. And it's rooted in this whole notion, and you may have heard it before, the technology adoption life cycle, right? And many times people forget about this chasm between the early market and the mainstream market when it comes to new technology adoption.
Yeah.
And I feel what happened with metaverse in the first, and it's hard to say it that it's been now. This conversation has been around for well over a decade, not in the pervasive, wide sort of adoption type of conversation, but by tech enthusiasts, the innovators who are playing around with the tech. And they sort of linked up with some early stage visionaries who saw that opportunity, but then they forgot about the chasm. There's a great book, called Across the Chasm. I think it's by Moore, where he speaks about the too many persons make the assumption that the mainstream market, made up of these pragmatists, conservatives, and even skeptics to technology, make up 60-70% of your real market that you want to attract. But you're just barreling the conversation saying, I am a technology innovator. I love this product. You need to use it. It's going to solve all your problems. And the pragmatist is saying, show me the use case. Show me how this is going to solve my business problems. And then they're like, no, don't just take our word for it, right? And really that is where I think even AI will face that challenge, where you have the real excited group. And that group, I think, even by the statistical curve, really is like a 2.5% of the marketplace are really that tech enthusiast. And then you have a couple, maybe 13. It's about 15%, Karen. 15% of the marketplace usually will be early adopters jumping into something, trying it like yourself, right? Like you're way on the to the left of the curve, all the way to the left, early adopters, and the rest of the market. And that's probably why you and I don't have as much here. You're pulling your hair out trying to figure out Why aren't the SMEs seeing it? But you know what we have to do a better job of is really creating the bridge over that chasm, right, that exists, which is you could be the evangelist for technology from today to forever until you build a bridge of pragmatic use case for the actual beneficiary or end user. You are speaking to yourself, and we will end up having these conversations alone.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is exactly why the digital world was even created, because we don't have many spaces in the Caribbean, let alone Trinidad and Tobago, that are going to have these conversations at the depths that we can take it and try to bridge that gap. So you're quite right. Now, I want to ask you, when people think of the metaverse right now, the majority of them who are pretty much not in the space are thinking about Facebook, Meta, right? Did Meta hurt or help the case for the metaverse?
I would respond by saying they distorted the conversation. And I mean, credit to Mark Zuckerberg in seeing the play coming down the chute and said, you know what, let me do a rebrand, rename, and just offload
And
billions of dollars. And this is, people need to understand perhaps the invested amount of capital can make our own national budget, we'll blush at it because it was this again, it's like new frontier, the whole gold rush. He saw something, he made a play, changed the name, created association, and then had a product or a delivered service that confused the market. But because again, you didn't spend enough time collaboratively defining the technology, agreeing on some of the sort of architectural similarities or the fundamentals, and
right,
then creating the innovation amongst players. And that is a necessary sort of first step if you are embarking on this journey. You can't be first to market. By definition, metaverse is supposed to be interoperable between platforms. By definition, there will be
right,
multiple metaverse providers in the future context, future state. If you accept that, then you can't own the conversation. And I think the
right,
distortion came from that. But I'll step back and say, uh, to explain metaverse, I think we have to take it from three dimensions, which is what is the environment that we're talking about? What is the platform's capabilities, and what are the enablers around that technology? And I think breaking it down that way allows persons to then frame any conversation, whether it's a Facebook Meta conversation, whether it's a VRPark, whether it's Fortnite, Roblox, into this frame, right? So when we talk about what is a metaverse environment, collective virtual shared space, created by the convergence of virtually enhanced physical reality, augmented reality, and the internet. You need all of those components if you say, what's the environment?
right,
Simply put, it is a virtual space that is bridging. You can recognize in the space things that you see every day, whether it's a chair, an office, a screen, a couch. In gaming, you see things that are real life, trees, etc. You have to have that to begin to define the conversation as
right,
being a metaverse related. There's other components, of course, augmented reality, etc. But at the base level, you need the internet to power the incredible use of graphics and inter uh, user agency, because that's the other
right,
key thing, right? There's a multiple number of persons coming in. So let's talk about capabilities. What would a metaverse platform be able to do? Well, it's highly immersive and interactive, which means you're not looking at yourself from a pictorial perspective or video perspective as you would do in Zoom. You have complete agency over an avatar or a physical represent, a virtual representative of your physical self as you would like to present in that environment,
yep,
that has agency to walk, talk, interact, connect, shake hands, deliver presentations, interact as if you were in the real world. So if the environment is not enabling you to move a representation of you in that virtual space, then again, the definition, is this a metaverse environment or not, comes into question.
right,
So these avatars can work together, socialize, participate in experiences, etc., that are transcending the physical limitations of where they are geographically. So another case would be in 2022, last quarter, we were able to support Maladukaran's Caribbean economic outlook for the region. And from my count, we had at least six different geographical spaces: South America, as far as Egypt, North America, Caribbean, and I think as well Canada, all interacted in that space in real time. Sorry, Europe as well with my team, all create a 4 to 5 hour economic conference with well over 150 users who stayed immersed in the space for the entire period, which was unreal. And it was a very unreal experience to see people feel that they actually were at a conference with breaks, with Tree Canal doing performance in real time from a studio in Trinidad, streamed through the metaverse. So that sort of definition. Where are you? I'm at a physical conference with Madhukran, who is switching between video, coming on as an avatar, and you saw the blend there of really where the boundaries of physical and digital became, blended and merged. And I guess the final part is, what are the enablers around that? And of course, virtual reality is key. So too AR, augmented reality. And I think in the 2024 context, we're going to see more interplay with artificial intelligence, blockchain, and other payment and maybe e-commerce applications that allow for persons to move beyond, well, I don't only like your Walmart metaverse shop, which is reality right now. I want to pick something off the shelf and buy it as if I'm in a store, right? And of course, that is no the sort of next step, where you have even concierge or sales reps who are now AI powered avatars. So we're moving now to even moving from user agency with physical persons behind to trained avatars using AI that will, of course, chatbots on steroids essentially, but they're interacting with you and giving you all the clarity you would need before making a purchase decision that could be done in platform, in environment, etc. So when you put those ingredients together, you're now saying, hey, this is what metaverse technology is opening up, as opposed to Facebook is metaverse. And you see what I mean by distortion, right? So can Facebook do this now? No, none of the above. I mean, they have components of Horizon World, etc. But this is the future vision for metaverse that cannot be owned, in my polite, respectful view, by one entity. It just simply can't. There's too many moving parts, literally.
Now, you are talking to the good people in the Caribbean. We have listeners from all over Trinidad and Tobago tuned into the conversation. They're listening to this conversation. I know there's many a people who are saying that, Brian, we don't want that. What is the use case of this, of me being avatar and walking around this virtual space? What is the benefit? What is the use case? We're not seeing it. Talk to us about why this is even important. What are some of the benefits and business cases that people could leverage this technology to help themselves?
Well, I mean, I would say it firstly by saying this technology is not necessarily at its stage now something that should be, in my view, widely adopted just because it's the cool and latest technology. You really need that, as you said, use case, proof of necessity, if you call it that, before trying to even have the conversation about being headed in that direction. I
Okay.
would say, however, think about how jittery our said Caribbean and Trinidad market feels about this variant case, single variant case, right? Like, I mean, just as a joke, like I got a loved one telling me, are you gonna come back before lockdown? And of course, I'm not saying that's happening. And I'm like, all the more reason to not, right? I mean, you don't want to be in that position. But but when those conversations, and you sort of scratch your head, think about how unprepared we were at that point, and think about in a world now where work, and this is what has happened. I mean, Karen, we've seen this. I guess I'll use some Caribbean example, but also even internationally. There's one of the largest users of metaverse tech right now has well over 10,000 employees with no physical real estate. They made a decision as a real estate agency to have a global presence without brick and mortar, and they have their full office environment completely done via an enterprise metaverse environment. They come to work, they show up, they do their sales meeting, there's accounting department, there's HR departments, all within a campus where they can move around, interact, they see each other literally in that way day to day. And it's increased the level of engagement levels around teams, it's increased the level of familiarity, of increased teamwork. But even from a learning perspective, there was a 2020 PwC assessment, quite interestingly, on the benefits of V-learning, because we weren't talking about that during COVID. We were talking about e-learning, right? So
Mm.
everything was about, your platform-based learning management systems, content is two-dimensional, front of you, etc. Many of the findings from the V-learning perspective was there was a higher level of retention of the information, as well as a connection to the material 4 to 5 times more than e-learning, because people felt in the environment it was a lot more immersed, and they felt a lot more connected to the learners and the fellow learners, and of course the teachers in that sense. And what that resulted in is this whole suggestion that when it comes to training, learning, and development, etc., oftentimes of course they contrasted even in-person classroom all the way to the other side of the spectrum.
Mhm.
But the learning styles, for instance, let's give a quick example. If there was some, unreal situation where there's a reduction or inability to do in-person training, or even online training for that matter, is now being contrasted. The question you have is, where's the next, or what is the next type of solution would you want as a platform or technology that allows people to feel that they're actually immersed in the environment, learning with each other, and not isolated? And that sense of isolation is really where I feel people note the difference when they spend. And I have tested it now, at least for, let's say, for IDB Trinidad's perspective, they've built a community of over 450 metaverse users.
Right.
As an example, what shocked me is that over 80% of that user base is between 40 to 60 years old,
Right. Right.
because that's their
Yeah.
audience. I mean, that so decision makers,
Yeah.
permanent secretaries, third party. And I have onboarded a large chunk of those persons. And I'm always fascinated to hear these persons, I guess my age and older, saying things like, "Oh, this is what my kids have been doing in these games. Oh, this feels so much different." Oh, and I've had one permanent secretary in particular said, she shows up to every single event she's invited to now, without fail. And it's shocking because she loves the interaction, the way in which she can feel connected to persons, etc. It's not anymore another Zoom meeting, Zoom call. So there's the psychological benefits of engagement. That's one. Training and onboarding. We found that recruitment, especially for let's say a multi-jurisdictional entity operating in the Caribbean, that you have the whole notion as well of challenges with connections when you're hiring across different districts. We've seen people actually try to apply the use case, which is bias. So this is a very interesting one. So
Right.
you want to think in the most part that people should be hired based on skill, competence, how they presented interviews, etc. But
Right.
how do you cure for implicit bias, right? Or even the unconscious bias, as they call it, right? Where
Mhm.
you know uh, people have their own perceptions of how somebody looks, or how, and really those things should not feature, right? And
Mhm.
and one of the conversations was whether the use of avatars created almost another layer of neutrality. I use the word neutrality because it allowed the conversation to be on the merits and demerits of talent and competence and experience. I mean, i.e., what's on the resume, and i.e., what's in the conversation, without the focus on, I don't like that hairstyle, or I
Yeah.
don't like your face. No,
He
I'm just
smells
saying,
like
like this.
cigarettes. He smells
Correct,
like
right?
cigarettes. Yeah.
So there's also the whole notion about, and really this is more of an enterprise and adoption by corporations. I'm going to be the first to say that most of the metaverse adoption will need to take place firstly by enterprises before you have widespread social use, right? In that way, because you first need, again, the reason, as you asked,
Yeah.
for why should I even be part of this. And the final point I'll make is on things like consultations, especially when they get towards tech. IDB is also supporting the Ministry of Digital Transformation in doing some of their public consultations via the metaverse as well. We've
Mhm.
done at least one. There are 3 more scheduled between this month and next. But again, it's focus groups. So the ICT community of Trinidad and Tobago, the youth community of Trinidad and Tobago, and looking at different groups that would feel a lot more affinity to having conversations. You're talking about the future digital transformation of Trinidad and Tobago. some of those conversations, and a very interesting one is, can public services be now offered in a way via Metaverse as an add-on to some of the available suites? South Korea has launched some of that, where a lot of their public services in 2023 are now available via Metaverse. You have still have the remote work concept. People are working from home, but they are present in an environment where you walk in, have a conversation with this digital avatar backed by a human being in that sense, talking through some of the challenges. So it's really much more personable and much more interactive, as
Yeah.
opposed to finding someone on a phone, sending an email. And if you think about that, what would you prefer? We talked about in the past, well, it's too much hassle to go into an office space, get in a taxi, go up Porter Spain, jump into, get in a line. Now you can wear your short sleeve shirts and slippers. But I mean, all of those things that were the friction points was always there. And now you still have people saying calling is a problem, email is a problem, website is down. Well, here's another conversation option where someone has to be at the quote unquote office virtually. They're home, working from home, or they're in the office. But the point is, you also can show up virtually and have a conversation with this officer or this agent. So to me, it's like, where do we want to start the conversation? Everyone else in the world is seeing how, beyond the gaming, how can I use this platform to allow persons to be bridged between their location and services, between training, recruitment, and maybe even onboarding, and my company's content and my policy agenda, and then how can I do cross geographical events and activities. Those are kind of like the current use cases that are causing some companies to scratch us that this might be a good bet.
Yeah, yeah. Now, right before we segue into VR Park, what are some of the things that companies may need in order to have, uh, in order to be a part of the metaverse conversation? What are some of the components? What are some of the tools? Because this is going to go beyond a traditional phone, which is a 2D screen. What are some of the things that they're going to need to be able to join in the conversation of the metaverse?
Absolutely, great question. And I have looked at some of the frameworks, and I like one from McKinsey that really lays out preparing your business, I suppose, for metaverse use. And it really starts with defining that value focused strategy, and it always starts with that. The question is, where do I sign up? How much do I pay for it? And then I'll figure it out. You have to first start with, why do you need this platform and technology in your business in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of businesses, and unfortunately within the Caribbean, try to be first to market with technology without having first defined the value strategy, right? And I think I always say, first, before you ask about sign up, let's talk about you. Let's talk about your own digital transformation. Or maybe somewhere along you have seen a digitalization opportunity, not even a full transform opportunity in one department, in one component of your business that may benefit from this, whether it's HR internal, whether it's customer facing, whether it's a one-off event because of a particular target audience. Let's first define what are those sort of metaverse goals in the first instance, and the role you want to play in that. Do you want to be a passive let's say, user of the technology for the purpose of one-off brand or product activation because you wanted to get a lot of hype around it, or is it going to be a lot more long term? Like, some of those roles are important, right? And just a quick segue again. I mean, where I think IDB Trinidad has reached to is that they have built in the ability to do almost metaverse concierge and metaverse advisory based on their experience so far, how an event should run, how to onboard persons, how to get them familiar with the platform. So they're inculcating the capacity to have these conversations either internal to the IDB group, to their other colleagues, or even to external stakeholders. And that took, of course, a period of time, but it also starts to tease out the new roles and new types of work that would be emerging because the platform calls for it, right? Whether it's from a
Right.
design perspective, from a strategy perspective, etc. So after you've moved into that development, that value focused strategy, I would then say test, learn, and adopt, right? So
Right.
it's obviously important to launch initial use cases, activities, and monitor these near-term results as a sort of proxy for where this thing goes in the future and whether you should even consider scaling. Because
Right.
there's opportunities to just do one-offs and say, you know what, my core client base or my core community didn't really respond well to this. They found it difficult, they found it incredibly frustrating. All of those things signals that you should not invest further into the technology, at
Right.
least for now. But there may come a time where you may need to. So what are you doing is test cases, very small, very light opportunities, and monitor the feedback from your users. In fact, I would say what was going to happen, like for me, from a tourism play, just to give an angle there,
Mhm.
I envision in a few years' time, we're going to move away from conversations on let me see your tourism board website or your social ads to I would like to interact with your destination in a metaverse environment. And I want to speak with the persons that represent your culture, whether it's an ad hoc, organized, or persistent sort of environment. I want to make travel decisions based on immersing in the space. Doesn't have to be a full replication, but I want to have an immersed due diligence process. And I feel that that's coming because if you've been in the travel industry long enough, we started this thing where you would actually book spaces in a magazine that was published once a year in time for the winter season. A piece of paper. You had to spend a huge amount of money, 5,000 US, to be placed to hope that somebody in a travel agency would open that magazine in front of somebody who walked in and said, where should I go this year? And maybe because you were top of the list or you had a photo, that was the case. Fast forward to now. You have all of the different ways in which people make travel decisions, but most of it is still based on other user reviews experiences as well as photos and images and videos. There's going to be another evolution where people expect to immerse in your destination. And they're going to start asking questions. So, where's your virtual world? Where's Port of Spain? Where's Maracas? Where's, like, let me see, let me get a snippet of Carnival. Let me see indigenous folks and communities. Let me talk with them. Let me hear what they sound like. And I feel that this is where, if we don't think forward looking, where can we fit in the strategy comes back to the point. You start with the end in mind. If that is what the future may look like, the conversation needs to start with how do I see the transition of my operation into that end user reality. So that's the three phases, Karen. I would say, first you start to figure out your value strategy, test, learn, and adopt, and with that information, you scale.
I agree. I mean, when the conversation of the metaverse really became mainstream 2022, one of the first cases that I thought about immediately was with tourism. The fact that we would jump on YouTube, we watching all the travel vloggers, we're looking at pictures, we're googling destinations. It should be that, in the metaverse I could now say, you know what, let me go and take a look at Runaway Bay in Jamaica. Let me go and have that experience. Let me pay 10 US dollars. Let me go have a
Right.
virtual experience of a destination, of a location, of something. And that could help me determine now to spend further money to then
Yes.
jump on a plane, book a hotel, and actually
Correct.
visit the location in the real world.
And Karen, to the point, like when I first floated that, you'd find the traditionalists, even from the sector, saying that's crazy. People need to physically be somewhere to experience tourism, right? And I think the first reaction is always this is going to eclipse our new. And I'm saying it's not the eclipsing, it's building the bridge. Remember, I talked about that bridge
Correct.
building.
Exactly.
It's like everyone responds to technology as a disruptor of their current business model, as opposed to adding it on as a component, whether front,
Exactly.
middle, or end of the actual transaction, the customer journey, it's always this reaction about that will never work because tourism is an in-person best experience model. And I'm saying, granted, the point is if you were able to give me a sense of reality before I got there, to your point, you hear the music playing, you're speaking with that Bayesian person who said, I'm gonna mix this cocktail when you show up here next week. Let me show you some ways in how we do it. Let me give you a recipe. Here's a QR code. Scan it with your phone. Here's the recipe. But he's talking to you in real time and shaking your hand while you hear the music playing in the background. Tell me if your conversion rate is not going to go through the roof. Like bang on, right?
Well, and on top of that, like people are paying for that experience. You can't. There's nobody that can tell me differently. People would pay. a nominal sum of money, right? It could be $10 to have that experience, to have that virtual experience. That's still a way for you to monetize and give people that taste of what's
Correct.
to come and whether or not they are going to now make that further investment. Because, I mean, let's be real. Some of these places are not cheap. Do I need to? I want to know what I'm going to experience in Turks and Caicos before I jump out 5,000 US
Yep.
dollars.
Yep. 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 Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I want to taste. I need to know that this is the right decision. But Brian, we have a call coming in. Let me just pull up this caller. Did he? Hold on. Caller, caller, good day. He just dropped. All right. So Brian, talk to us about VR Park. Let us know what it is and talk to us about the vision and mission of VR Park.
Yeah. So as I said, VRPark really collaborates with Virbela, which is the technology developer out of the US. And VRPark is located in Europe, but it's also been looking at the Caribbean, Latin America space as part of its expansion strategy. And very interesting, and the differential with our platform is that we've decided to really focus on enterprise use cases. Simply put, we're not hugely pushing the notion of the need for VR headsets and new hardware purchases in order to participate in the metaverse. Our sort of proposition has been existing hardware generally can accommodate the interaction in the metaverse, i.e., PCs, laptops. And that probably is going to be one of the better ways to get persons more familiar with the technology when you don't have the hardware installation, as well as the complication of having to wear something in its
Yep.
current format, which can get pretty debilitating, I would say, after an extended period of time. And the focus, therefore, is on creating a metaverse platform geared towards institutions, businesses, and organizations where they can really triple down on those key activities we spoke about, which was learning and development, events, office and team interactions, and of course, you have the other bits of training and social activities.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it's a campus design, so you have this very enormous, and at some point we could invite yourself and your team to come take a walk through. I think Gabriel did last week as well. But you have everything from basketball courts, football courts, etc. on the social end to auditoriums that have seated 2,000 persons simultaneously, having full scale conferences as well. And that has been almost like the amazing part of it is how you can have that level of persistent interaction geographically in a space and still feel part of a community, even though you're in your home, in your office, another part of the world, interacting with a laptop device. And that's to me where I think the value is, that you often forget that it's still just a laptop with a keyboard and a mouse, and that's it. I mean, you're
Right.
literally moving this avatar through the environment. So that's been the focus. Again, we're not trying to be the platform for all possible use cases, because again, some environments, metaverse environments, will geared towards social interaction. So a lot more
Right.
event based. Some are more strictly on the gaming side, and some actually incorporated blockchain and even payment solutions and even virtual real estate buying and selling. Now, I would spare a thought to say that's where people got a little bit burnt in 2022 and 2023, when again people started to hype the notion of buying virtual real estate inside these environments. And that again, like everything else speculative, is preying and playing on a lot of ignorance, right? About starting with, why would I need to? Our model is a mass, so metaverse as a service. We believe strongly in leasing, and only what you need it for, and only when you need it, as opposed to developers are saying, no, you're gonna have to cough out 5, 6, 7 figures to recoup my software development expense and cost. And I think that's where the conversation gets very muddled. So folks bought real estate in, I wouldn't call the platform's name, but it was a DAO environment, right? So
Right.
you had an environment where you couldn't decide who co-located next to you, and there were persons who built or set up their office space, and next to them something a little more nefarious set itself up, and you couldn't do anything about it, right? Because it's not organized strictly for one niche. So I think that's where we've we've chosen to sort of focus our attention. Most of our clients tend to be institutional level, corporate level, and entities that have either geographical presence or regional presences that require their staff and team members to interact in real time and create a higher level of engagement and heightened levels of morale, I might say as well.
Yeah. You had me laughing here thinking about all the 6 7 figure purchases of virtual land. And it got more ridiculous than the next. Like it was, oh
But
boy.
Kurt, I would say what I like about this I'm glad I'm happy how you started the conversation, which is it hasn't gotten quieter, it has gotten more focused, and now the conversation of metaverse, that is. So
Yeah.
the hype men are either burnt or out of the conversation, right? And I like that, right? So the guys who just flinging cash at anything that seemed to be first to market, first
New and
mover, first
shiny.
cash, try it, right? It's bright and shiny, as you said, and they've lost their shirt, their wallet, and everything else. And what's the residual? The technology is still there. The technology is improving, not just incrementally, rapidly, year on year. I look at the platform that was around in 2021, 2022. I look at the same platform now, and it's so hyper realistic, right? You get a lot more customization. You get a lot more of the conversations and diversity, equity, inclusion coming in. All of it, and this is just months apart. You have updates coming out. There's another one now where we actually have it web enabled.
Yeah.
That was a big step, moving from having to download applications to a device to showing up with a web link and still being immersed, right? So
Right.
you see what's happening. The trend is to improvement, but guess what? The hype, the noise, the speculation, and I guess the financial losses are now muted or at least dampened for the time being, which means what's happening is real world practical application, block by block, day by day, case by case, which is what the intention was. And I think the market is a 2030 horizon where you will really see, I guess, the culmination of all of this incremental investment of time, use case, and awareness building.
And, and that's good. I mean, you made some really good points, and that kind of reminds me of the conversation around NFTs. I could not wait for the pixelated whales to. Okay, it happened. Get it out of your system. Get it out. That way, we can get to the actual practical and tangible uses
Correct.
of
Smart
what kind of
contracting, smart
contracts. Yes.
contracting. They bought that, and that's the problem. There's so much noise first in the conversation
Yeah.
that it's almost like you let them go ahead. Just go right
Yes, you
ahead.
have to. All right. Go, all right. Get it out. Have your fun. Make your money. Lose even more. Whatever. But get it out your
Correct.
system so we can actually get to the meat of the matter. Now,
Correct.
I want to talk about culture because technology and culture, they butt ahead all the time. We're talking about the metaverse, and VRPark has done an amazing job at solving and helping remote work and getting organizations to utilize the platform with respects to remote work. But now, when you think about Trinidad and Tobago and the culture that we have here, where unless I see you
Yeah.
physically in front of me, you're not doing work. So how can, what can VR Park, what can IDB, what are some of the strategies that you guys could, because we have the technology to help with remote work. But when we talk about, culture and trying to get that to change, what are some of the things that you guys are looking to do to make that shift culturally so that this isn't another topic that is just talk and it's not taboo, and we can kind of become more productive by leveraging the technology at hand?
Yeah, and great point. I think, as you said, it starts with the overall perceptions of remote working or working from home. I mean, without having to go into too much detail, I think it was signaled pretty clearly that there's going to be a general aversion to that adoption, even from a government perspective, because there are concerns about discipline and productivity levels. Let's put it very broadly speaking like that,
Hmm.
which is even in person, it's a challenge to get that level of productivity and accountability when you adopt a wide scale policy of working from home or remote working. Do you run the risk of even less output, right? I mean, and I suspect that some of the the musings that I've heard about that fair seems to suggest that there is work to do on work redefinition. What is work? How is it measured? How a person is held accountable? What are the consequences? Like at a very fundamental level, I think you have to first have work defined, a work defined, work measured, work results accountability, and all that, consequence management laid out. I don't think we're I think we need to do some a lot more work, I think, nationally on that score. Maybe private sector in some areas has arrested that somewhat. But of course, we see the raging debate in the US about work from home policies on a whole. In fact,
Yeah.
as a digital nomad, you see, I meet many a person, especially the US, who crying about, they need to, they're getting pulled back in and they're actually out here hiding with VPNs. Trying to stay in GMT -5, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Eastern time zone, hiding and masking VPNs. And while it's comical, it does point to, and maybe in that context, there's also this desire for how work is performed, right? And I think that's more generational, Karen, than cultural. Even if Trinidadians want to be Trinidadians, you still have a very active Gen Z that's taken pattern from how they would like to go about doing work, right? So,
Right.
so you have cultural and generational colliding post COVID, and here's a suite of different technological options in front of you, and a older architect or at least framers of work policies, public and private, saying to hell with all of that, right? We're gonna keep going this way. But as I said, it just takes another scare, like this week or last week, another pandemic scare, so to speak, that that should hopefully force more dialogue about what if we, and I think that's where the resilience, or we talked about that was such an abused term during COVID, but this whole thing about building back better, if that wasn't taken in its truest sense about practicing the measures that reinforce resilience for the eventuality of repeat, then those are the type of companies we'll want to be talking to. Not a national conversation agenda necessarily on shifting. And I'm never going to be one to say metaverse as the solution. It's
Yeah.
metaverse as a redundancy measure for some of your other strategies for the eventuality of a complete need for remote work. But if you, at a policy level, organizationally, don't promote or even maybe segment your workforce into those that would be productive and prefer generationally to be doing it this way. Because I would say the opposite. In banking days, I don't know, well, as working at a bank a long time,
Yeah.
we always wondered, and quite, it was a very fast segue. Why did we tried for decades? I would say decades long, getting first of the month bank customers to not show up. And I'm going to say it very broadly because we know what we're speaking to in terms of the elderly, right? But listen, I mean, I go back to the 90s, early 2000s, where I was the guy talking to these guys about telebanking. Hey, you don't have to come and update your passbook on the line. Your pension did come in, etc. Statements, telebanking at the time, ATM cards at the time, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you 20 years later, it didn't change. And you know what? We all seem to have forgotten along that continuum. It was, besides the fear of the technology, the need for the bank official, as they would tell me, to write in the passbook how much money I have, or else it's not official. All of those notions. But you know what we all missed? It was a social gathering. The reason why they came on the first of the month is because Betty, Sue, Bob, James, I haven't seen them for a month. I don't generally go out, and it was a lot more about how you do. And when they passed on, the of course the grieving of the fact that one of their group members for that month is no longer with them, we forget that sometimes. So sometimes you have to look at it beyond just the technology, but really the reason why people do things are not always just linearly based on inefficiency or the need to be anti-technology, and therefore the solutions need to, as I said, segment the solutions based on your demographic because you might get all of it wrong.
Absolutely, and I think to that last point about some of the older crowd coming in because it was a social gathering back in Canada. I think I think what's missing in the Caribbean is that we don't have much of the additional channels so that if the old people want to come in, they can come in. But if we don't have the online channels, if we don't have the digital channels, and we
Yes,
all have to come in together,
correct,
it's a
correct.
problem because at the end of the day, North America and most South American countries,
Yep, yep.
we don't have to come in. We
It's
can leave
unreal.
that to
It's
them.
unreal. It's unreal banking e-commerce out there. It's unreal, right? So
Correct.
I would say not even going. I mean, the level of enablement of technology, and to your point, is that yes, they serve. In fact, there's a line for elderly people now, and there's seats and everything for them. But you go to banking halls in South America, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
There's nobody in the line, right? You see only elderly people in the bank in pockets like this, because everyone is completely digital, right?
Yeah.
Online. So I guess to your point, and that's where it starts there, is that I would always be hesitant if somebody says, I want to add on this when I don't understand how the rest of your channels or the rest of your technology is already serving your community. Why confuse them with something additional if you haven't optimized the two or
Yes.
three others that are already there? Please don't confuse yourself or your community or your client base by adding something for the novelty factor. And that is a big problem, I think, in the Caribbean, where we adopt based on novelty.
Yeah, and one of the biggest missing components, and I mean, this has been something I've been screaming from the mountaintops, is we just continue to dump technology without education.
Correct.
In North America, when we started to do online banking, I remember being in high school, and when the Visa debit cards came out, you would walk in. When online banking and the Visa debit cards came out, you'd walk into the bank and they would ask you immediately, "Hey, what are you looking to do? I want to pay a bill. Have you heard about online banking?" No, we have a workshop happening in 5 minutes to do a crash course on
Yep.
mobile banking, online banking. Back in Apple, we used to have classes that would teach people how to use
The
mobile
phone.
banking on
Correct.
their apps, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
on their iPads, on their
Yep.
phones. And that's Apple because Apple understood the more we teach you how to do your day to day on your devices, then
Trust
you're never
technology.
going to
Trust
leave.
the device. Correct.
You trust
Yep.
the device. You're never going to
Yep.
leave the ecosystem, right?
Correct.
And, again, just listening to you talk, I'm thinking about how we have this grand conversation that is happening almost every other day about traffic in Trinidad. And, the reality is the infrastructure of Trinidad is built. We're not going to start expanding, land into the ocean. We're not going to start knocking
Yep.
down buildings to widen roads. We need to start thinking about how can we use technology to get people online so they have those channels. And then obviously you're going to decentralize some of the buildings so that not everything is in play. But that's going to help it with traffic. But then I think with you talking about VR and VR learning, I think that helps accountability because you have to show up virtually,
Correct. Correct.
right?
You can't
Which
take. There's
was
no camera to take off. There's no sipping coffee, watching
correct.
TV in the background, because you have to be present, right? And that is the difference factor. People are their level of attention to the material skyrockets because there's no more distraction. If the quote unquote trainer calls on you, it's not, oh crap, let me fumble something. You are in the space, right? So
Yes.
whether it's something tactile, whether you're learning a process, whether you're doing role playing, all of those things are possible. But again, you can't absent yourself from the engagement. In fact, you don't have a choice, because if you say, come walk over to this table and sit with me and have a chat, you have to pick up your avatar and walk over to the table, right? So
Right.
so this constant need to be present and immersed in the conversation is why I think PwC saw the results where people retained the information much more strongly than e-learning, where people tend to check out and multitask, camera off. So if camera on, logged in, and not even home, muted mic, right? And I suspect that's why people have their concerns about remote working, and there's the other extreme that we hear where in the US these companies do tracking by keystroke. I mean, to the point where idle time and keystroke. So there's this extreme version of trust, confirmation, or accountability, which I don't think our Trinidad culture will be able to deal with at all. I mean, that's going to be a huge pushback. But what's the happy middle between, as you said, the cost of time and money to get from point A to point B, to be productive? The time being you're losing 2 to 3 hours of your life, forget the cost. before
Yeah.
you could actually be productive, and then what's the quality of work output when you know that you have another 2 or 3 hours of that to face, right? So it's really just about and I always say this way, like, you don't do it organization wide. You start with a department, you start with a unit, you start to test to see what's the level of improvement, rotate it between departments, etc. But embedded in there is, as I said, the cultural issues and the demographic issues, right? You have generational issues there, and then you also have, of course, the cultural issues, which is I don't know if it's still there, but as I said, what was remarkable for our use case with IDB has been 18 months and going,
Yeah.
building that command, and to see that older crowd download, interact, use technology. I mean, it's really encouraging for me to see that they didn't complain about the barriers. There was little complaints about use cases, utility, movement, navigation, and they were repeat uses. And of course, we would do some quick polls about complexity, feelings of immersion, retention of information, and it's all positive. It's all positive. So I can't even say that's a young person thing. The technology is not a young person thing.
Absolutely.
It's completely situational. It's completely relevant to the need at the time, and those needs need to be better mapped.
Absolutely. And I think we need to create more spaces where people from all age brackets can come in and learn how to use the technology, because it's not an age thing. Like, I remember sitting down just the other day, sitting down in the airport next to an older lady who looked like she was in her 90s. And I watched her, she is navigating through her banking app, closed
Yep.
her banking app, and then went on to Instagram. And I was like, well, damn, Sally. And I just, again, I'm always amazed at these things.
Correct. Correct.
So
Correct.
it's not an age thing. I just think with us, we just don't have the spaces to teach and to give people the assurances that, you can learn how to use it, and if something does go wrong, we can definitely help you solve it and help you
Yep.
understand
Yep.
what went right, what went wrong, so that doesn't happen again. Because when you, like, I remember when one of the banks decided to stop doing teller transactions and forced everybody to go to the ATM on the drop of a dime. And you had, Tanti in the ATM, like, I've never used this thing before. And
Correct.
there's nobody there to help you. Again, it just shows we just keep on dropping the technology and expecting that because it's been out for
Yes.
so long that people are gonna you just know how to use it, and that's not always the case. But Brian, with just your closing remarks on VR Park, the metaverse, and the world of work, what can you tell us about, just to kind of give people some assurance that this is the way forward? It's building, it's growing. More organizations are putting this to work because they see the use case benefits, and this is something that organizations in Trinidad and Tobago need to start paying attention to because it does solve a lot of their issues.
Yeah, and it's been a great conversation with you, Karen, talking through these points, because again, we have a fad based world, I suppose, right? So whatever is topical and thematic gets all the attention,
Yeah.
and we tend to skip over going deeper into each of the technology strands as they come out. So I mean, kudos to you in trying to even
Thank
catalog some of the important points that need to be reinforced. But from an outlook perspective, I would say, like, very very early on, that metaverse is not at its fullest potential or even its fullest maturity right now. And when people are pointing to it to be the all-encompassing definition, that's not on the horizon in this year or next. But I would say 5 years is a short time in the technology-driven world. I mean, if you think about November, December 2022, like, AI was not a conversation. Think about last year.
you.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's no other way to describe. And I try to stay with updated monthly, but it's just you just have to float with the whole movement because it's just too much. But what I would say is this: you're probably gonna see more rollout of augmented reality devices over the next 3 years, setting the stage for the eventual sort of interoperable virtual reality world, because the computing power, the pervasive access to high speed internet is not yet globally integrated to allow for the metaverse to be, let's say, the Zuckerberg vision of, rolling out Facebook. You can't roll out metaverse globally right now, right? You can't. But what I would say is that I mean, at least from a TNT and Caribbean perspective, start framing your organization's future context needs beyond just about technology into issues such as cost of real estate, physical expansion, the nature of work, the type of workforce that you may end up attracting 3 to 5 years from now, i.e., gig workers, overseas outsourced workers, etc. And also the ever present sort of risk factor of possible health and related challenges and lockdowns and restrictions on usual business as usual
Right.
activities, and start to think about where and how technology can play a role in future proofing your organization, as opposed to implementing future focused technology to see where it goes. Like, it's really the opposite, right? It's the other way around. Like, how will you be? Where will your organization be 5 to 7 years from now? What is the composition of your workforce at that stage? Where will they be? Will they be in Trinidad? Will they be overseas? And will you need all the real estate that you currently have now? Like, there's a for instance, right?
Right.
And then on crowning all of that is whether or not you believe the technology is useful for your company now. I guarantee you, over the next 3 to 6 years, the market is going to become increasingly more demanding of services, offerings, and presentations of your own offerings and collateral in augmented and virtual reality settings for them to believe that you are credible and worth their attention. So I've always said, you might think it's not a now thing for you. The rest of the world is learning how and learning why they want it. So don't be flat footed when they start knocking and asking you for it. Start exploring even the initial conversations, because that to me is where we don't see the punch that comes left field, right? Which is that the market is asking. It's not what you think, it's really what the market is demanding. And we said that point earlier. If travel and tourism, which the Caribbean is heavily dependent on, which I still work in now, is going to start to want interactions with destinations, we need to start the conversation on digital representations. And there are many countries who are already, or destinations that are doing that. So again, market is going to change. Your future business survival and expansion and even sustainability is ever changing. Set your strategy and then explore the technology to match it, because this train will continue with or without your endorsement, with or without your participation.
Listen, you said a lot there that is extremely critical, and I endorse it 100%. Before I have you go, Apple drops the Apple
Mhm.
Vision Pro glasses. I gotta get your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts? Because it kind of ties into what we're talking about. What are your thoughts on the Apple Vision Pro glasses and use cases for it?
Yeah, I am not an Apple fan to start with that, but Apple is getting it right and faster right. I would say, if that's a better term,
Yeah,
because they know that the interim step has to be augmented reality. You have
right.
to first have a device that is not cumbersome to use, but first applies light digital overlays to someone's physical experience of their world day to day before they're going to plunge themselves into full scale avatars. So I endorse any type of technology that is, as we said, building the bridge between seeing options. I mean, right now with Google View, I use it quite often here, where you could have elements of interaction with your phone onto the physical environment via AR. And I suppose
Right.
that's the other thing. It's enabled in Latin America in certain cities. It's not necessarily pervasive yet in the Caribbean, but there's a great way to see augmented reality overlays. But guess what? I feel the struggle of, I have to
Mhm.
lift a device in my hand, right? So
Right.
the effort to do that versus now something that's closer to the I guess the biological, and that's really where it's going. Is like, how does it become biometric, if that's a good way to put it, where it's closer and closer to your body in how you interact. Because the next part is going to scare the world is contact lens solutions, which is another
Oh
step
boy,
just
feel like you're
after
cursing
this,
people
right?
now.
Yeah, but I guarantee you, the lens
Yeah.
game is literally to teach people to become comfortable with it, towards moving to lens digitally, because that's where it becomes less of a helmet or goggle based solution to, again, natural interaction with technology, digital enablement of your person, right? And of course you're going to get the entire Marish and Parish pushing back on that because of the conspiracy theories of the whole
Yeah,
where it goes. But I would say I endorse the premise of what is being attempted by Apple, which is a simple device, not heavy, not complicated, sprinkling useful overlays of augmented reality into somebody's lived experience on a day-to-day basis. And then, of course, with that increased adoption, which is, how do I now apply that now to a more ubiquitous sort of world where I want to do this daily or more frequently immersed into it. So kudos. I mean, I suppose the big debate is next. Who's going to come up with the next best one? I know Samsung was playing around with something. I know Meta is trying, hard to keep up with it, but it's
yeah,
good for us as consumers because, again, they're going to battle it out until something becomes, I guess, best in class.
yeah.
But our problem is going to be the cost of acquisition of the hardware in the near term, right? Which is, it's not going to be widely adopted in the Caribbean and in our context.
I think even a step before somebody picks up the Apple ProRes glasses, um, I'm even seeing some of the smart glasses, like Ray-Ban puts out the smart
Exactly.
glasses, and even me, like I'm like, this is perfect. I don't speak Spanish, so going to a Colombian, I could wear a smart glasses, and I can now interact and understand every single sign. I could read the menus with my Ray-Ban glasses.
Yep. Yep.
That's huge, and that is something I could see more people picking up as an
Correct.
entryway to where we are going.
Correct. So it's breadcrumbing the conversation. That's absolutely essential to as we said, crossing the chasm between early market and mainstream market. You need to build the very very important bridge.
Lovely. Brian, if we, Freedom 106, the Digital World family, want more information and to follow you and your journey with everything related to metaverse and VR technology, where can we find you?
Just find me on LinkedIn, Brian Frontin, add me, and we take it from there. Very straightforward.
Perfect. Brian, thank you for your time. Enjoy that Peruvian barbecue for me.
Thanks again for the opportunity, Kara. Keep up all the
No
great work.
problem. Thank you. Take care, Brian.
Cheers.